Hello. If you cannot hear me, put your hand up. If you cannot hear me, put your hand up. I'm Bruce Lawson, and I'm an HTML alcoholic. So this is from a department store in Tokyo, Japan, and HTML is a brand of men's clothing. It's world standard men's clothing. The guy who designed this brand used to be a web developer. So of course, when I was in Tokyo, I wanted to have my photograph taken here. And I really loved Tokyo. We're going to talk today about a Japanese concept called Shokunin, which is defined in both Japanese and in the Japanese English dictionary as craftsman or artisan. And an artisan is a worker in a skilled trade, especially one that involves making things by hand. So this is Japan. It's a marvelous country. They have incredibly sophisticated toilets that can squirt hot or cold water up your arse, or indeed anywhere else that you so choose. In the ladies' toilets, and I have verified this by sneaking into a conference hall during a rehearsal, in the ladies' toilets, you can press a button and it will play the sound of water flushing, but no water actually comes in order to conserve water, which is a marvelous invention which I commend to all of you Milan people. You can walk down the road and you can meet a geisha. You can turn the corner and see the statue of Godzilla. And here is something I bought in a department store. It's a fancy dress foreigner kit with a huge big nose and blue eyes that you can wear to Christmas parties. And you can wander along the road having a chat with a robot. And I really like robots. A robot is a machine, especially one programmer will buy a computer, capable of carrying out a complex series of actions automatically. There are robots in your life. Maybe you have a sat-nav in your car. Maybe you have a washing machine. This does your washing for you. You just press the button and it goes. You probably have a coffee machine because you are Italian and therefore civilized about these things. And you maybe own a VCR or a TiVo. And there are robots you work with. You probably use code linters or validators. These are machines that do a job for you. Maybe you use CSS grid, gradient, or animation generators because life is too short to memorize the syntax. Perhaps you use Sass or Less to automate writing your CSS. Perhaps you use Babel, or if you're a real masochist, you use Webpack. These are robots. And robots threaten people's jobs. In the United Kingdom, in the early Industrial Revolution, there were a gang of revolutionaries called the Luddites who would smash the spinning machines because it was putting people out of work. Even now, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, like the Finance Minister in the UK, is seriously considering an Amazon tax because the robot, the website, is actually threatening physical retail. We make websites, and we have to acknowledge that some of the websites we make put other people out of work. In fact, the World Bank showed that in all of these countries, a good proportion of jobs around today will be automated, and those people will have to find alternative employment. From a technological standpoint, fewer than half of today's school children in China, Croatia, or Thailand can expect to find an occupation that even exists today. I graduated university 30 years ago. I know I don't look old enough, but it was 30 years ago. I could not dream that this job I do existed. I couldn't dream that I would be traveling around the world talking about a computer in my pocket that has all of human knowledge available to me. Over the centuries, economies have adjusted to massive changes in labour markets. The canonical one is the agricultural industry in the US. There were 12 million farm workers in the USA 100 years ago. Now there are 700,000 in a population 3 times larger. But these people didn't starve or die or jump into the sea. They adapted with the labour market. And we, as web developers, will need to do that too. Your jobs are in serious danger of being automated. This was an article on Smashing Magazine, disclosure, that's my employer, a couple of years ago, showing that website builders like Wix, Weebly, Shopify can allow your clients to make themselves a really great looking website and have fantastic uptime and loads of fail-safe servers at less than I pay to host my own WordPress blog. These people will take some of our jobs. This is a given. Disclosure, I used to work for Wix. I was a contractor on web standards, open source, and fashion. I had nothing to do with their consumer products, and I no longer have any connection with them, financial or otherwise. This lady keeps following me around and taking photographs, even though the police have warned her off. Please, madam. Okay, so you say, well, the Wix stuff is only really good for drag and drop template stuff, and that was true. I'm talking about Wix simply because I know them best, but the same holds true for all of the website builders. Once upon a time, creating a website was complex, long, and expensive, and that is why we all have nice jobs and coffee machines. But with just a few questions, Wix ADI, Advanced Design something, can tailor websites by learning about your business. So you're a lawyer, the Wix ADI has a good corpus of knowledge about legal websites, what kind of thing goes in them, what navigation terms there are. You type in your social media stuff, and it will drag appropriate content in and generate the website for you. Okay, so that's only for brochure sites, you say, but what about interactive sites? Well, Wix have got Wix Code, which just came out. And this is a very limited, sandboxed, highly secure jQuery-like language that anybody who can write some simple jQuery can now add databases, custom forms, etc. to their static Wix website, taking some of us out of jobs. So what can we do? One of the things we can do is to get artisanal, which is related to or the characteristic of an artisan, especially food and drink made in a traditional or non-mechanized way. It's pronounced artisanal. It is not, as I originally thought, art is anal, which it could look like. I thought it might relate to Art Garfunkel, who legendarily was a perfectionist, but it's nothing to do with Art Garfunkel being anal. It's to do with the characteristics of an artisan. The people who make your hipster coffee. The people who make Clara's avocado toast. These people, look how sad they are because they can't afford a house because they spent all the fucking money on avocado toast and posh coffee. But I'm going to stop sneering now. Okay, in a minute I'm going to stop sneering. Because there was a great article in the New York Times saying, don't mock artisanal pickle makers. Instead of rolling our eyes at self-conscious Brooklyn hipsters pickling everything in sight, we might look at them as guides to the future of the American economy. And I go further. I think that we could look at them as guides to the future of web development. Many of the manufacturers who are now thriving in the US have done so by, excuse me, avoiding direct competition with low-cost commodity producers in low-wage nations. Instead, they scrutinized the market and created customized products for less price-sensitive customers. The bottom end of our job market will be taken by Wix, Weebly, Shopify, Squarespace, in exactly the same way as 10 or 15 years ago, we were all terrified that WordPress was going to kill web development. And it didn't. It actually ushered in a cottage industry of people who make WordPress sites, customize themes for smaller clients, and earn a good living. The same is going to happen with the low-end stuff. There will be people customizing Wix and Shopify, etc. But if we want to not compete with the low-end commodity producers and earn a good living and keep our industry alive, we need to be artisanal, do better than the machines, do what the machines can't do. So I got interested in this, and because I'm interested in Japan, and because my best friend in real life is a carpenter, I chanced upon this book, Japanese Woodworking Tools, Their Tradition, Spirit and Use, by Tasio Odate. And he wrote about the Japanese concept of shokunin. It means artisan, but it means not only having technical skill, but implies an attitude and social consciousness, a social obligation to work his best for the general welfare of the people, an obligation both material and spiritual. And this really resonated with me, doing it well, not just for the pride in the craft, but making the world a tiny bit better while you do it. To those of you taking photographs, as soon as I get back to my Airbnb, I'll tweet a link to the slides. By all means, take photographs. I know I'm beautiful, but the slides will be online later this afternoon. Not everything about a shokunin is applicable to the web. This is, I've forgotten the word, tokonoma. And this is the special place where a Japanese shokunin keeps his or her tools. And they honoured their tools of the trade at New Year. And they would put rice cakes and tangerines on top of the tools to honour them. But I think this is inapplicable to us. I think we, in the web industry, get too hung up on our tools. We fixate upon the tools too much. I'm not against things like React. React is great, despite what this Bucharest graffiti told me. And if you want to use React Mbengular Bonestrap Hubpack.js in your projects, great, good on you, enjoy it. In a year's time, everybody will laugh at you because some other cool front-end thing has come across. But if you like it and it works for you, great. But remember, these things are just tools. They're very well-known tools, but they are just tools. Think instead about the raw materials. If you're a carpenter, yes, you have good saws and chisels, but the thing you fixate upon is the quality of the wood that you're working on. And in our industry, we have this holy trinity of raw materials: JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And here they are all together. This is Brendan Ike, who invented JavaScript. This is me. I didn't invent HTML, just one tag, the picture elements. And this is Howcom William Lee, who invented CSS. And notice, we're having a beer together, and we're not punching each other. In our industry, we get lots of arguments about JavaScript and CSS, but the actual creators of JS and CSS had a beer together in my presence and did not hit, kick, bite, or scratch each other much. Of course, it wasn't me who invented HTML. It's this guy, Tim Berners-Lee, or as I call him, Sir Uncle Timbo, because he's a friend of mine. He's not. And he said, this is for everyone. He said it at the beginning of the Olympic Games in 2012. This is for everyone. And his core principles of the web still hold true today. The web, he said, is universal. It's open. It's decentralized, and it relies upon the principle of the least power. And now I'm going to bore you by going into all these in more detail. It's universal, and this is important. There are more human beings alive today inside this circle than outside this circle. This is a fact. There's 1 billion human beings in that circle, and in 32 years' time, that billion human beings will become 2 billion human beings. And the people in that circle are very young, so they are internet savvy, and they are rapidly becoming middle class with disposable income. And they want to buy the things that you make or sell. And you want to sell to them, because by the time that these people go from 1 to 2 billion human beings, in the West, the population will decline because we're getting older and we're having fewer children. The only group of people outside this circle that will get bigger is Africa, which will become 2 billion by 2050, and Latin American senior citizens, because they are living longer. So if you're selling to Latin American senior citizens, great, carry on. If you're not, you need to think about these people. And Africa. By 2050, Africa will be 2 billion people. By 2100, the population of the world will peak at 11 billion people. 5 billion of them will live in Africa. Southeast Asia is the fastest growing internet market in the world. 480 million users by 2020. And Indonesia is the fastest growing nation in the world on the web. But the popular Indonesian online site, I don't know why it says online site, there are no offline sites, but anyway, that's TechCrunch. Blibli has 1/3 of its 2.5 million customers living in rural areas. They only have access to 2G. And the reason for this is simple. Indonesia is thousands of islands. It's really hard to get fast connection between those thousands of islands. So Blibli knows how to make their site work for 2.5 million people on 2G. Does your website work for 2G? In Indonesia, 75% of users are on 2G or even edge networks. Half of Indonesian smartphone users said they experience network problems daily. Can they reach your site? This is Asia as a whole. You can see 38% of people are not on mobile, 45% have mobile internet, and 17% only have voice-only mobile connectivity. Compare that with Indonesia, it's slightly different. Thailand is different still. The Philippines is different still. They all have different characteristics, but what they share is a hugely growing market. Oh, and Vietnam. If you are interested in this, and this is a shameless plug for my employers, I am the commissioning editor for Smashing Magazine's membership. It costs $5 a month, and you get lots of webinars. On Tuesday, the week coming, I'm really excited that I'm going to host a webinar about the state of the web in Southeast Asia, where Eka, a friend of mine who's a web developer in Yogyakarta and a punk-based guitarist in Indonesia, Jing, who's Malaysian but lives and works in Singapore, and Sophia, who's a front-end developer in the Philippines, will be organizing a webinar and answering questions about Southeast Asia. I'm really excited. It's going to be really great. And I'm also really pleased, actually, that it's 3 female developers who are doing the talking about this region. What these people share is they don't all use Chrome. Hands up who uses Chrome only. Hands up who tests in Firefox. Nice, good. You guys are good. Go away, you don't need to hear the rest of this. But there are big e-commerce sites like Stripe who only support Chrome, and that will not work in these areas. In these areas, people are still using Internet Explorer 6 in China, for example. They're often using proxy browsers because that's the only way to get online. And also, If you make an iOS app or a web app, you are not going to reach these people. Here's a little story about a website. It was called Igniter, and it was set up by 4 middle-class Jewish guys in their 20s in New York. And it was set up for the more conservative Jewish communities. So it's, excuse me, it's a dating site, but instead of sending one man and one woman on a date, because that didn't really work with the more conservative community, they'd organize group dates. 10 guys and 10 girls would go out for a meal. 5 guys and 5 women would go to the cinema. And that was easier for that more conservative society. But they only got 50,000 sign-ups. And they were going to close down until they noticed that they were getting 50,000 hits a week from India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. And they realized that their model for Orthodox Jews in New York was also working for conservative Sikhs, Muslims, and Hindus in South Asia. So they rebranded as Step Out. They moved to Mumbai in India, 3 guys who had never left New York, and they became India's biggest dating site. They only did this because they were on the World Wide Web, not behind a paywall and not behind a walled garden, and because their website could actually be accessed by people in India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. If you had asked them, hey guys, what's your South Asian strategy, they would have said, we don't have one. We're for New York middle-class Jews. But actually, what made them successful was the fact that they were on the web and available to these people. It wasn't easy. When they moved, they had to think. They had lots of Seinfeld references for the American Jewish market. How do you translate those? Do you translate it into Hindi? And what is group dating in Hindi? Do they ask users for their caste? Are you a Brahmin? Are you a Dalit? What kind of offline partnership should they have? And crucially, what should they do when the credit card system goes down? Because the credit card system in India, I can attest, is pretty shaky. You have to localize the global, be on the World Wide Web, but remember there are things that are culturally applicable or culturally advantageous that will help you. The World Bank said successful online platforms can't necessarily be transplanted to a foreign country without adapting to the local market and local institutions. So there's a company called Flipkart. They're in Bengaluru, which is in Karnataka in India. It used to be called Bangalore. And they are beating Amazon in India. One of the reasons why is that they made the first progressive web app in India, so they could reach every phone on every crappy network. But another reason isn't to do with tech, it's to do with knowing the local market. Amazon was using the postal system. If you've ever been in India, you will know that it's really difficult to find a precise address because those cities have no urban planning. Things just sprout up. Number 7 on a street is next to number 732, and number 730 doesn't exist because it was knocked down 3 weeks ago. So what Flipkart did to make sure that the stuff you ordered was delivered is they partnered with the Dabawalas. The Dabawalas are a group of men, mostly illiterate, who go to a businessman's house after he's left for work and collect the delicious lunch that Mrs. Businessman has prepared, and they take it away and they guarantee, without fail, to get that lunch onto the businessman's desk by lunchtime. These people, because they live in these streets, they know the streets, they could fulfill the deliveries for Flipkart, whereas Amazon couldn't, because it didn't know the local culture. Another example is credit cards. There are many unbanked people in Southeast Asia, and so because they can't buy online because they don't have a credit card, they like to go out and physically shop. If you've ever been in Thailand or something like that in the summer, you will know how nice it is to go into an air-conditioned shopping mall to do your shopping. So shopping in Asia is a leisure activity. I don't understand that at all. I hate shopping unless it's for a guitar or attractive shirts. But apparently there are people who like shopping. So in the West, we're worrying that online businesses are closing down bricks and mortar business. In the East, online businesses are now setting up bricks and mortar shops so that people can enjoy shopping and they can pay cash. Another interesting thing, this is Thailand. 2 months ago, I was on holiday in Koh Samet, which is an island 4 hours from Bangkok, where I used to live. It's a national park, but directly outside the entrance to the national park are 2 competing 7-Eleven convenience stores on the opposite sides of the road. And the 7-Eleven is ubiquitous in Thailand. I read a stat, it's something like 98% of Thai people are never more than 150 meters from a convenience store. You can buy everything in these, but crucially, you can pay for everything in these. Thai people don't have credit cards. The reason is, if your credit card is stolen and you report it to the bank, you are not liable for any transactions. Thailand never had consumer protection legislation. If your credit card is cloned or stolen, you are liable forever. Therefore, nobody has a credit card. But they love shopping on the web. So when you buy a flight ticket or a book or some clothes, you're given a QR code. You walk to your 7-Eleven, you scan the QR code in, you pay cash plus 10 baht, which is like 10 euro cents, and the transaction's covered. So Thailand's never going to get credit cards because it doesn't need them, because it's built this alternative method. But if you don't know this, you ain't going to do business in Thailand. eBay and Taobao in China both entered the Chinese market. eBay became the dominant market leader with 85%, and then Taobao, which is owned by Alibaba, kicked eBay's arse, and eBay left. And the reason is because eBay was American and it didn't understand China. Alibaba is Chinese and it understood China. And its killer differentiator was the fact that in China, people want to people want to instant message sellers to ask some questions about what's being sold. eBay didn't know this, they didn't offer this, they lost. A practical tip, don't do this. This is from a flight booking site. I'm not going to name it, but flights, pretty much their business model is moving people from country to country. So they should know that there's lots of different cultures and different types of people using their service. If you don't type in a first name, it puts it in red, and then when you type in your first name, it gives you red font. But in Southeast Asia, if you write somebody's name in red ink, you are wishing them dead. I'm not an MBA. I'm just a layman, but I suggest that wishing your customer dead is not the start of a long and happy business relationship. If you are an MBA, your mileage may vary. The reason is, when people die in Asian Buddhist countries, they are cremated 100 days after death. A dead body in a hot country can get fragrant pretty quickly. So they are walled up in a special wall in the temple, and then they're whitewashed over, and then the corpse's name is written in red paint on the outside of a wall. And therefore, to write somebody's name in red is to wish them dead. Don't do it. But also, don't do this. If you try and type Bruce but don't enter a last name, it will not let me submit the form. This is my friend Putri. She's Indonesian. Her name is Putri. Her Twitter handle is @onlyputri. She does not have 2 names. Tens of millions of Indonesian people only have 1 name. And telling somebody that their own name is wrong is probably rude. And I'm not an MBA, but I think insulting people's name is not the best way for a long and harmonious business relationship. Okay, I'm going on and ranting. Okay, I've got loads of time. Use the right tools and know your raw materials. Sir Uncle Timbo wrote about the principle of least power. In many, many computer languages or computer environments, you can choose something powerful or not powerful. So we can do things in CSS with one line, or you can write a metric ton of JavaScript to do it. Always choose the simplest tool to achieve the task. If you can do it in CSS, do not do it in JavaScript, because 13 million requests for JavaScript will time out. This was a talk by a friend of mine in BuzzFeed. Our monitoring tells us that 1% of requests for JavaScript on BuzzFeed time out. That's 13 million requests a month. These are not weirdos who turn JavaScript off in their browser. These are not people in sub-Saharan Africa. These are you going into the metro so the JavaScript doesn't turn up. Or these are you behind some weird firewall in work where it stops some scripts for no apparent reason at all. Every one of you will have occasion when you don't have JavaScript and you're living in the heart of Europe, doing this technical stuff all the time in a major city, and you've all experienced this. My friend Stuart Langridge made this handy diagram. Everyone has JavaScript, right? No. Everybody has JavaScript most of the time, but not everybody has JavaScript. So if you're relying upon JavaScript to make your website even function, it's gonna break. Coming soon in mobile Chrome, if Data Saver is on a 2G speed or slower network, Chrome disables JavaScript and sends a message to the user saying, hey, we've stopped the scripts on this site. If they want to click it and download kilobytes of wonderful React, which you need so I can have a nice spinner, they can, but they won't. There's a big fight at the moment between CSS and JavaScript. People are dismissive of CSS. It's only CSS, people say. Am I an expert carpenter if I know how to bang in a nail? No. And also, people don't really know CSS. Here's a poll. Given these two classes, which color would those divs be? They're both blue. But more than half people who are front-end developers didn't know this. And that's fine. We all have to learn. But if you don't know something, learn it. Don't dismiss the whole language. John Resig, whom I love, he's a massive Japanese woodcutting art fan, and he invented jQuery, which was brilliant. He said something totally wrong. He said, the fact that you can look at HTML and not know how it will render is just silly. That's totally wrong. That's the point of HTML. HTML, you don't know how it will render because it's your content. The CSS and the browser and the form factor of the device determine how it will render. You should not know how your HTML will render by looking at it. The only way possible for you to know how your HTML will render is if it's full of fucking font tags and center tags and beige color. So I'm sorry, John, you were wrong. Somebody who is wrong, and in my opinion, evil, but if they're here, please don't hit me. Mentally parsing CSS specificity rules is a skill I don't want my employees and co-workers to have. You what? A friend of mine, Paul, said he passed a JavaScript hiring test using HTML and CSS. Why? Because you only need CSS in many cases, and being able to identify those cases is a serious programming skill. These are not bullshit toy languages. These are the foundational languages of the web. As a great international philosopher, me, said, of course, a developer should know CSS inside and out. They should understand cascade and inheritance. It's a foundational technology of the most democratic communication technology ever invented. If you don't know CSS, you are not a front-end developer, you're a script kid. I should point out, other opinions are available. Thank you. Of course, we live in an age of components, and now you're going to boo me because I love component development. I love reusability, composability, testability, shareability. And I think Cristiano Rastelli, who's probably Italian, he said this, and he let me use the slide. Thanks, Cristiano. We used to think about separating concerns like that. That was a mistake. We should think about separating concerns like this. It is not valuable to separate concerns based upon the technology. It is valuable to separate them on the function. So I've completely changed my opinion. It is fine to mix HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together in one functional unit, a component. But it is still not fine to leave out CSS and write it all in JavaScript because 13 million requests a month will time out. And we've all seen this GIF. This is entirely true 2 years ago before Flexbox and CSS Grid. CSS Grid solves this problem. But it is true that CSS for components is a pain in the arse. Everything's global. Order effects cascade. There's a dependency system without import that doesn't work. It relies on markup structure. It is not true that your CSS and HTML are separate. Your CSS relies upon class names in your HTML. Your CSS relies upon the structure and sub-elements. And CSS, if it breaks silently. We've all changed some CSS on the site and then 2 weeks later noticed an obscure corner of the website that is fucked. Yeah? It's hard to test. So this is why so many component-based application developers dislike CSS, because they're sailing across the happy seas of e-commerce with all of their components nicely stacked up, everything's going swimmingly, and then they try and add some CSS and, oh, fucking Christ, look what's happened, everything's on fire. So they blame CSS. There's a tremendous amount of memorization of unexpected behaviors, rules, names, thank you, and other idiosyncrasies. It's loaded with cruft. But CSS is great. It has IDE support, syntax highlighting, code completion, validation, generators, and a huge community. Is anybody here a designer? Thank you for waking up so early. We asked some designers what they hate about JavaScript CSS. And because it's designers I'm quoting, I've laid it out nicely in Comic Sans. Always having to remember to camel case properties, cryptic domain-specific languages, having to change it when I copy and paste into the browser, the lack of linting and autocomplete, and performance. CSS in JavaScript costs us. So one of the things I did when I was at Wix, I have no connection with this now, but I'm still very proud of the work we did. We invented something called Stylable, CSS for components, a preprocessor allowing you typed CSS that is guaranteed never to leak outside the component, but it is CSS syntax compatible, and therefore all of your tools and all of your IDEs will like it. It's designed so you don't need to know the inner structure of a component that you've got from another team. You just need to know the names. It gives CSS an API. Take a look on potatobruce.io, which is a mohawked potato based on me, or stylable.io. Again, I'm not trying to sell it to you. I have no connection with this anymore, but I'm very proud of it. James Kyle, who's behind Yarn, Babel, and TC39, the committee that writes JavaScript, said, making Stylable static is a huge performance win. It's BDSM licensed, and it will reduce the JavaScript on your, on your site. Because we're sending too much JavaScript to people. Alex Russell, sinister mastermind at Google, said, we cannot send so much JavaScript. We need to confront the developer experience bait and switch, because tools that cost the poorest users to pay wealthy web developers are bunk. The JavaScript you send down is costing real people real money. Germany, to afford an entry-level mobile broadband package, you work 1 hour at national average wage. In the States, you work 6 hours at national average wage. In Nigeria, you work 28 hours. And in Brazil, you work 34 hours. You sending down shitloads of JavaScript so I can see a spinner is costing these people money, and you're making them work harder. In Nigeria, the data needed to watch 2 minutes of online video a day costs more than sending a child to school for a month. Yes, your video's lovely. Yes, the picture of your bearded CEO and all of your friends sitting on beanbags in the ping pong room is delightful, but it is not as important as this child's education. Shokunin is a social obligation to work for the general welfare of the people. Be one of the good guys. Be like Princess Diana up in heaven. Be like Mother Teresa and Princess Diana holding hands in heaven. And I note in passing that the long tail of the internet is what allows Mr. Linford to sell a canvas print for $22,000 of this picture. The web started life responsive, accessible. This is the first ever web page. It's responsive out the box. I can tab through it, get to links which are visible, click them and go there. We choose to break it. Sir Uncle Timbo said the power of the web is its universality. Access by everybody, regardless of disability, is a central platform. And this is not about being lovely to cripples. This is about making the web better for everybody. Accessibility is part of usability. A recent study in a Swiss university said high conformance with web accessibility guidelines may provide benefits to users without disabilities. There'll be a link in the slides. It's Schmutzer, these people. 61 people without disabilities use different websites of different levels of accessibility. High level of web accessibility led to better performance, task completion time, and task completion rate than low accessibility. This is not about being lovely to handicapped people. This is about making the web better for all of your customers. And decentralize. Sir Uncle Timbo wanted there was no single point of failure, no permissions needed from a central authority. So let's not centralize the web. This is Myanmar, Burma. 5 years ago, a SIM card cost 2,000 US. The regime democratized, opened up, now a SIM card cost $1.50. Therefore, everybody went on the web. Everybody used Facebook without understanding that the web is communication, not information. End result, loads of hateful messages about the Rohingyas. May the terrorist dog Kalars fall fast and die horrible deaths. Facebook had one moderator who spoke Burmese. End result, the expulsion of the Rohingyas into Bangladesh and what is arguably a genocide. It's not just Burma. In Germany, wherever per person Facebook use rose 1% above national averages, racist attacks on refugees increases by 50%. I like Facebook. I use it to talk to my mum. I use it to share pictures of my dog. But do not require Facebook. Ironically, even on this far-right website, complaining about Twitter and Facebook setting themselves up as judge and jury, the only way to comment is via Facebook. Coral exists. It's by Mozilla. It's open source. Use that. Don't require people to use these massive silos if they don't want to. Because the internet has given you, everybody here, has given you a good living. You're here at a conference wearing nice clothes, you've got a nice house, you've got a nice life. Pay it forward. The internet matters. An increase in internet maturity in mature countries led to a GDP growth per capita of $500. By contrast, it took the 19th century Industrial Revolution 50 years to produce the same result. So make sure that your websites work for the next billion people so they can enjoy this kind of growth. Developing countries are home to 94% of the global offline population. And there are people in sub-Saharan Africa who walk miles to go to a doctor, but a feature phone with a web connection and a PDF of where there is no doctor, translated into local language, is first-line medical care. There are people in India, Bangladesh, Nepal, all around the world who cannot afford school textbooks, but World Reader is a site you can access on a feature phone, and it has hundreds of thousands of books for free for people. The internet is education for people. There are people in horrible regimes where having the wrong religion, having the wrong opinion, having the wrong sexuality can get you murdered. And access to the internet is their only way of seeing the world outside. As this Egyptian activist said, if you want to liberate a country, give them the internet. To be a Shokunin, progressively enhance, don't rely on JavaScript. Don't do feature detection, not browser sniffing. Compress images and use responsive images so you're costing people less money to see your site. Remember to make it performant. Consider a progressive web app rather than an iOS or Android app. And test in proxy browsers, test in IE. Many people in the world still have it. Because the web is not computers. The web is not a cloud. The web is not a series of tubes. The web is these women in Africa. It is this blind guy in Toronto. It is these women on a bus in Bangladesh. It is this lady in a wheelchair in Taipei. It is this Cambodian farmer and his granddaughter. It is these bros at a football game. It is these ladies I photographed on a beach in Kerala. It is this man with Down syndrome on the tube in New York. The web is for everyone. Thank you very much.